What the hell is this book? How do I even begin to describe this book? How do I describe thee? Let me count the ways. No, but in all seriousness, I have spent the last 2 days doing basically nothing but reading this book, because every time someone asked me, what is it about? I would have to tell them, I have no idea. All I've heard about this book online is that Yesteryear is about a tradwife influencer who ends up going back in time to the 1800s and has to actually live the traditional lifestyle that she's been propagating this whole time, which is very convenient as a one-sentence summary, but it basically tells you nothing, especially when you consider that everyone is talking about this book because Anne Hathaway bought the rights 3 days after it released on the 7th of April. At the time of recording, it is the 22nd of April. So Anne Hathaway bought the rights 3 days after this book came out. But that's all the discussion seems to be about, not what the book is actually about. Welcome back to Vocally Annotated. My name's Sarika, and there is in fact a reason why this one-sentence summary is all I can tell you about the book, which is where I'm now going to come in and say spoiler warning. I will be talking about this book in its entirety, so if you haven't read it yet, I highly suggest you go read it and then you come back and listen to this, because it's definitely worth sinking 2 days into. Also, just want to note that I am at the tail end of recovering from a cold, so if my voice sounds a bit funny, that's why. Okay, so to start with, the reason why the only thing I could tell people was that one sentence summary, that was the only thing I could tell people for about 320 pages of this book. This book has, how many pages does this book actually have? 391. This book has 391 pages in it total. So it was only in the last 70-something pages that I was beginning to understand what was going on. Which means for the first 3/4 of the book, I had no idea what was going on. And so all I could give people was that one sentence summary. I just kept reading it and I was like, I need to find out what's going on. I'm hooked. I'm invested. I don't understand. I understand that it's trying to show me something, because most of the book bounces backwards and forwards between the past, narrating how Natalie, the main character, got to where she is in the present day, which is the prologue, and basically building up to that. And then it bounces between that and then the actual past, where she's in the 1800s and she's really confused and she's like, I need to escape, I need to go back to my real life, what is going on around me? And so as a reader, you're kind of kept in this holding pattern where you're just waiting for something to happen, you're waiting for it to make sense, you are stuck in this cycle of wanting to, I've really felt that I was stuck in this loop almost, where I was like, I want to read the next chapter and see what's happening in the 1800s, but I also want to read the next chapter after that and see what was happening in her young adulthood, and then it would just go like that. But I think it was a really smart way for the author to write the book, because effectively you're trapped in this cycle, the same way that Natalie is trapped in the cycle. I couldn't tear myself away from it, the same way that she can't tear herself out of this, again, holding pattern loop that she's stuck in. Also the hold that the patriarchy has on her, this need she has embedded in her brain that she must be a good Christian woman and she must perform as a good Christian woman, which I will come back to later on in this video. But the experience of reading this was therefore being trapped in her brain, and it was just I realized this as time was going on, as I was getting to around the 300-page mark, and I was like, I've read 300 pages of this, I've read 3/4 of this book, and I still don't know what's going on, but I'm just stuck. I can't do anything but read this. I can't put it down. I can see why this book has been called a psychological thriller, and I definitely don't think it gets boring at any points. It does keep the pace moving, but at the same time, it's so unlike any other psychological thriller I've read. And also, I had no idea what the hell was going on, because I couldn't predict anything. I truly could not have told you what was going to happen next, which I think, big feat, big achievement. But yeah, it was so confusing. That was why I also felt like I had to keep reading, because I just could not have predicted where it was going to go. I've seen this book compared to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I haven't read, which feels like blasphemy. I told a friend of mine that I hadn't read it, and she was like, how could you have not read this book? And I was like, I know. I actually had a copy and I was going to read it, but then I lent it to someone before I could read it and never got the copy back. Anyway, remedied. I have a copy. I will read it at some point. But all that to say, I still have not read it. But I have read Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Great trilogy. Highly recommend. But I remember with Oryx and Crake, so I was gifted that when I was 17. And when I was 17, I was like, I don't understand this book. What is going on? I don't like it. Put it down. Tried for the next 6 years to read it. Like, I would pick it up at various points, try again, put it down, and I was just not getting anywhere with it. Eventually, I was speaking to someone in uni. I was telling him, like, oh, I don't like Margaret Atwood as a writer, like, she's too slow and I just don't get it. And he just smiled at me and he said, you're so impatient. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you need to give it a chance, like, you need to have patience. And you haven't done that, therefore, you don't understand. And I was like, alright, bet. So I tried reading it again, and this time I was very conscious of his advice to read with patience, and then I was actually able to get through the book and enjoy it. Went on to read the other 2 books in the trilogy. But all this to say, you do need patience when you read Oryx and Crake, because Oryx and Crake also does that thing where it jumps between the past, explaining how we got here, and then the present. And the whole time you're seeing the present, you're like, what the fuck happened in the past to get to this point? And the way I envision it is like, at the beginning of the book, you're standing in front of a door. And Margaret Atwood opens the door and is like, well, hello, dear. Would you like to see my garden? And so you link arms and you're strolling very calmly, very casually through this garden while she's showing you around. And as you're going through, the garden is her world, like the world in Oryx and Crake, and she's pointing out different things like, oh, look, this is the thing, and then is narrating it to you as you go. So it's not like the book is being thrown at you with loads of action points, like dun 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 dun. Like something like the Da Vinci Code, for example, whereas like that very immediately hooks you and grips you. But this is like, things are slowly unfolding as you continue taking this walk, this stroll through the world in the book. And that was exactly how I felt about this one. It was like, you will be hooked, you will be gripped, but it will unfold basically at the end. And until then, you just need to walk through the world slow enough to take everything in, like see what's happening on your left, see what's happening on your right, and then you begin to piece it together as you go along. That was very much how I felt while reading this. I hope that makes sense as an analogy. It's a very clear mental image I have, and I'm not sure how well it translates, but doing my best. That was my literal experience of reading the book, and now I have my points that came up as I was reading about the actual book and the story and what was being said, that I'm going to go through the gender performance of it all. So Natalie's raised in what I believe is a Christian fundamentalist upbringing in Idaho. I might have got that wrong. It might not be Christian fundamentalism. It might be some other, it's some sect of Christianity, but I'm not fully aware of it. And that is a really big point I want to bring in, because one thing about the internet is that it collapses global geographical boundaries, especially within, like, I can only speak about the Anglosphere because I live in the UK, and so a lot of things that, you know, I would see online on the English side of the internet, they might come from the US. It's usually the US that's putting out stuff that then people who also live in the Anglosphere will look at and be like, this is a thing, right? Or they'll look at something and be like, oh, then whoever this person is, they're talking about something that applies to me. Now people are starting to get to the point, I think, including me. Like, this was a thing I had for a really long time, like while I was a teenager, an early adult. And it's only very recently I've come to the understanding that, like, oh, the US and the UK they are fundamentally very different places. Just because they're collapsed on the internet, because the internet has no global geographical boundaries, it doesn't mean they're the same place, doesn't mean they have the same context. And like, while rationally you know these things, it's very different once you actually see it in practice and see how different people are, how differently people live, all the rest of it. Which is to say that this kind of Christianity that Natalie follows and a lot of the other characters follow and they talk about in the book, that's not something that you really get here. If you get it, you don't get it in London, where I live. And also, I'm just not in that kind of, I'm not Christian myself, so I wouldn't be exposed to something like that, even if it was. But that's the point I want to make about Natalie, is that by reading this, and reading it because it's in first person, I, as someone who's not exposed to it, really feel like I've gotten an insight into how people brought up in this kind of environment, who live in this kind of environment, think. Not to say everyone is mentally ill the same way Natalie is mentally ill, but it's just a very different way of looking at life compared to what I'm used to. But that also applies to the specific ways that Natalie tries to perform gender. That the whole book revolves around her performance of being a woman, her gender as a woman, and living up to this ideal. And so living up to this ideal becomes her entire purpose in life, which feels like a really big, almost hyperbolic thing to say, but everything she does is a negotiation of, is she being a woman correctly? Is she doing this thing correctly? Not only a woman, is she being a good Christian woman correctly in the way that she has been taught she is supposed to be? It reminded me a lot of Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, because Scarlett also has this thing of like what being a good Southern woman is like, and she's constantly trying to live up to this image of being a good Southern woman, and she looks to her mother Ellen a lot for inspiration. Like, to her mother Ellen is the quintessential Southern woman. Never mind that Ellen is actually like miserable in her existence, and all that Scarlett knows this, but Ellen is miserable because she didn't get to marry the man she loved and blah blah blah, and she just married Scarlett's father because he was there, basically. But Scarlett doesn't see that. She just sees her mother being the absolute ideal pinnacle of a good Southern woman, and she aspires to emulate her, even when she is very actively not doing that. It's a thing, like what she tells herself is like, I'm not doing it because times are tough right now and I can't afford to be kind in the way my mother would have wanted me to be, or in the way she would have been in this situation, so I'm going to figure it out and get us back on track, fix things, and then I will be a kind person. Except it doesn't work like that, and I will come back to this in more detail later on, but yes, in the same way that like Scarlett is not a nice person, she is not a kind person, but there is a very clear comparison between Natalie, who looks up to her mother and she takes on what her mother says as this is what it means to be a good Christian woman, and Scarlett, who looks up to her mother and what her mother says is this is what it means to be a good Southern woman. Speaking of Natalie's mother, motherhood is one of, if not the most important tenet of being a good Christian woman in this book. Natalie says at one point that when she was a young woman, she was horrified by the idea of menopause because it meant that women wouldn't be able to have children, and that was their purpose, and if you took that away, then what a horrible life you've condemned them to, the afterlife, she describes it as. Yet, when she has her first child, it's only once she's about to give birth that she realises, hang on, I don't actually want to be a mother. And the result is that when Clementine is born, she's absolutely miserable as she realises what has happened to her, and she says that, like, she is no longer Natalie, she is no longer a person in and of herself, she is Mama. That is her new, not even just title, like her role, her being has become this, and she hates it. She fantasizes about killing Clementine because she doesn't want to do it, but she's only realised this now when it's too late, because this is all she has been told her purpose in life is. This is all she's been gearing towards for this exact moment, and when the moment comes, she doesn't want to meet it because she didn't actually want it. And it's interesting because her mother says, you know, Natalie gets into Harvard from her random small high school in Idaho. She gets into Harvard with a full scholarship. She drops out of Harvard because she gets married and she gets pregnant, but like, she went to Harvard. She was interested in getting away initially. Then her mother says, when Natalie gets engaged, like, I'm really surprised that you got engaged because I always thought you would become a professor and stuff. Like, it's clear that that was something that Natalie had an interest in based on all this, but from her own internal narration, you would never know that. And then her mother steps in when, actually, now that I think about it, her mother's always nameless, but yeah, her mother steps in when it's clear that Natalie is struggling, and the nurse clocks this the day after Clementine is born and is about to suggest psychological help. Her mum's like, no, you just need to go for a run, you'll be fine, and tells her to get up and perform, basically. I mean, she says it explicitly to her later as well, but she's like, get up, you have work to do, this is women's work, this is what you need to, the performance is the work, you need to do it. And so Natalie goes for a jog around the hospital the day after, like a day or two after giving birth, where she's still got stitches that need to heal, and of course the stitches open and it's terrible, but like, that is the extent to which she is not allowed to get help. that is the extent to which the performance, the show must go on. And so Natalie, who clearly shouldn't have had children, takes this on and continues to get up and perform and continues to have children. And she says, like, as she has more children, she gets more and more detached from them until the point where she can hire nannies to look after her children. And she says that day she cried because she was so happy that she would never be one-on-one alone with her children again. And then eventually it gets to a stage where she doesn't even recognise her own kids because they spend so much time with the nannies and not with her. And it's very clear that, like, motherhood is part of the performance of gender, of being a woman, of being a good Christian woman. And for Natalie, who shouldn't have had kids, didn't want kids, but realised it too late, it is a performance in the truest way. And when the story tells you how and why she had kids, that becomes even more explicit. Like, she ends up having 9 children over the course of the book. At least 2 of them were conceived using a baster. She gets her husband to finish in a bowl because he can't maintain his erection with her, and then she uses a baster to impregnate herself because it's that important that she continues to have children to uphold being a good Christian woman, to be a good wife, mother, which is made explicit when her father-in-law, Doug, agrees to lend them $5 million to buy the ranch in exchange for her, quote, giving his son a big American family. That is the thing that is important to him. And as a conservative politician who really cares about the appearance of things, it puts into perspective how important this thing is for the appearance of it, for the performance of it, if this is what he's going to focus on as the exchange for the money. This is what he wants from her. And she even says at one point that she was expecting him to say that he wanted to sleep with her in exchange for the money, and she would have done it. But he doesn't actually care about that. He cares about the appearance of it, and the appearance is that his son appears prosperous. His son appears to be doing man's work, and his son is being the good Christian man that he's supposed to be. He is performing his role, which means Natalie has to perform her role. And she performs her role even in the conversation when she lies to him that was their plan all along. Yeah, they wanted a big family. When it's very abundantly clear that at this point in the book, she doesn't want that. She is miserable and irritated with her husband not helping because he is just being a Christian man who doesn't really help with the babies and stuff. She's doing it all by herself. Something that she didn't even want to do. Never got the help she needed. But even in the conversation, before anything actually happens, that's part of her job. That is part of her performance, is to lie and say, of course, she wanted a big family from the beginning. Especially since she explicitly says that, according to their Christian beliefs, having only one child is a sin because they need someone to play with or something. But the way Natalie has internalized her understanding of the need to perform gender, the need to perform motherhood, the need to perform as a good Christian woman, is what makes her such an interesting character, because she is a victim to the patriarchy and a victim of her society, but ultimately she's not a nice person, and she never has been, and is what makes it abundantly clear once she starts her social media that actually she is a really smart businesswoman, which is another similarity she shares with Scarlett O'Hara. Scarlett O'Hara also takes the performance that she is required to do as a good Southern belle, and she effectively, like, systematizes it. This is such a weird comparison, but Scarlett O'Hara is like Alex Hormozy. I say that, and I'm like, this sounds so weird to say, but actually I think if Scarlett lived in this day and age, she would be a grind set bro. But she has taken every aspect of femininity that she is required to perform and systematized it, so she knows exactly what buttons to push, exactly what to do to get this outcome, if this then that, A equals B, and she runs it like a business, especially at the beginning where she's churning out Beau like that and she has all the men sitting around her at the garden party, completely weaponizing her role as a Southern belle. And later, more specifically to this particular comparison, is how she is in business. Like, Scarlett takes this brain that she has so far used to effectively systematize being a Southern belle, and she uses it in business and discovers that actually she's got a really good head for doing complicated maths in her head to work out the accounts and stuff. She also uses the performance of femininity to get her business by garnering sympathy from people like, oh, this poor genteel Southern belle is working and having to support her family because her husband's not, like, man enough to do it or whatever. She performs for the Yankees when they come. It's like, oh, I'm a good Southern woman. Like, I will interact with you. She hates them behind their backs, but she's like, I will be the Southern woman you need me to be, and I will perform, and I will have my former slave driving the buggy so that you can see it and you can... She uses it as part of her marketing strategy, basically, is like the best way to put it, which is effectively what Natalie does with her social media. Like, she weaponizes the femininity that she has to perform and channels it in such a way that it will make her money. And while this book has been compared to both The Stepford Wives and The Handmaid's Tale, and, you know, I haven't read either of those books, based on what little I know about them, I'm like, okay, I can understand where these comparisons come from. But it's also that in these books with these women, the thing is being done to them. Whereas I think actually as a person, Scarlett O'Hara is a much closer comparison for Natalie Helen Mills, because they are both the people doing the thing. They are both the people who are not good people, but they are good women, good Christian women, good Southern women. They are good women. They perform that very well. And they actively go out, weaponize that, and use it for their own benefit. The difference is, Scarlett is doing all this in the 1860s and 70s. Gone with the Wind is set during the American Civil War and the Southern Reconstruction. I think the span of the book is 12 years. But Natalie is doing this in the modern day and age. I wouldn't be surprised if the book opens in 2026. I think it's supposed to open in 2024, but I don't actually know, don't quote me on that. But at the very least, like, within the 2020s, you can tell that from the way it's written. Which also, and side point, I really appreciated the way this book talks about social media. I've seen this thing before. Someone pointed out before that, like, one thing books tend not to do is they tend not to talk about technology, like new technology. So for ages, books didn't really talk about mobile phones. When social media started becoming a thing, books would actively avoid mentioning social media. This was a thing I noticed in the books I was reading, and it was also a thing I saw discussed online, that books don't handle it very well. And then when they do talk about social media and other new technologies, it was just very awkward, and it just didn't... I don't know, something about it was off. But Yesteryear handles it really well. Like, it feels really natural. It feels natural to the book. It feels natural to the story. It's just written in such a way that I'm like, okay, this isn't cringe. And maybe it's because social media is at a point where it no longer feels cringe or like weird or too new to be writing about. But I don't know, I just want to say that, like, it was handled really well. Caro, Claire Burke, I think Caro is how you pronounce her name, the author, she handles it really well when she actually writes about social media and the experience of, like, I'm filming for this, I have this many followers and this is what I need to do, blah 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 blah. Maybe because she has that experience herself, and she's not just writing it as a thing, as a concept, she is writing it because she does host a podcast, she does have an understanding of what this life is like. But anyway, going back to my point, yeah, Scarlett does it in the 1860s, where she doesn't have any other options as a woman in her society for how she wants to behave and perform. Whereas Natalie lives in the modern era and she has choices, but she chooses not to take them. She even leaves her hometown to go across the country to Harvard. She has the opportunity to be exposed to so many different people, and she doesn't take that when she has the chance. She doesn't even finish her degree because she gets pregnant. And this ties into a broader discussion about the pink pill pipeline. And I just realised I'm wearing pink and I'm talking about being pink pilled. Didn't plan that at all. But the pink pill pipeline, like, Natalie is clearly an intelligent woman. She's clearly ambitious, because for someone who's supposed to sit back and focus on the kids and let your husband take care of business and stuff, she doesn't at any point sit back and let her husband take care of things, because she's like, no, he's an idiot, he doesn't know what he's doing, I have to do it, I have to be the breadwinner and make money. You don't grow to millions of Instagram followers and YouTube followers and whatever it is, the operation the size she has, without being ambitious. So, and also without being intelligent. So Natalie is intelligent, but according to this pipeline, like, this is the only way she can channel it. She has to channel it into a performance. But social media is built on performance. So by being so good at performing, she is able to take that, perform for social media, and she's able to funnel her ambition and intelligence into that and watch it grow. That's why she's so good at it. It's fundamentally not that different from what she was doing before. And I think that's the point. It's not that Natalie is trapped by the pink pill pipeline It's that Natalie is a product of the pipeline. She's internalized the need to perform so much that if you were to remove that, she wouldn't know who she is or what she actually wants. Like, you follow it to its conclusion, you take it to the end, and this is the outcome. And in the same way we talk about the manosphere for men, it's so important to talk about the way women are pink pilled, or like the algorithm tries to pink pill women. You've seen something about, you know, living the soft life or being a feminine woman, romanticizing your life. Like, these are all ways the pink pillers get to you. Slowly, they infiltrate this way. Because if you're a young woman, like in your 20s, I can almost guarantee that you've seen some sort of pink pill thing at some point in your life, the same way that a man in his 20s will have seen some sort of red pill thing. And the thing is, if you're looking at it from the entry point, like, it doesn't look so bad, but the algorithm will do what the algorithm will do and keep feeding it to you, right? And to be perfectly honest, like, it happened to me recently. I realized that, oh shit, a lot of the things I'm saying were not things that I would have thought a year ago. And the thing is, the pink pill pipeline doesn't teach women how to perform, because women already know how to perform. We already do it. Even Michelle Obama was talking about this on Call Her Daddy, and I was listening to it this morning. She was talking about, like, yeah, women perform every day. Like, we wake up, we're performing. Like, we do it. It becomes a thing that's, like, as easy as breathing, because we're all so used to having to do it just in day-to-day life. And what the pink pill pipeline is then doing is effectively colonizing that performance so that it doesn't serve anything but itself. So it's like you're continuously feeding it into itself, like that snake that eats its own tail. And it's not feeding into anything else. It's not serving anything else. It is hollow, because, like, it's just continuously self-referential. Like, I'm sure we've all had that experience, whether you're a woman who's come across pink pill content or you're a man who's come across, like, manosphere red pill content. Like, after a point, they're just repeating the same talking points over and over again. And it's like, why are we doing this? You know, I was having a conversation with a friend recently about self-optimizing, and she was like, you know, you start self-optimizing, or, like, optimizing your life because you want to improve your life. Like, right, you want to better your life somehow. And then it gets into, like, you can so easily be caught up in it, and it becomes a thing where it's like, eventually you're living your life constantly optimizing everything, and everything has to be optimized. And it's like, actually, what are you optimizing? Now you're stressed about optimizing your life constantly. You haven't actually optimized your life. You haven't actually got the benefits out of it that you wanted. Like, it's not serving the thing it's supposed to serve. Which is effectively what Shannon tells Natalie when Natalie calls Shannon a home wrecker, and Shannon's like, there wasn't a home to wreck. Like, none of this, like, all the adults on the farm can see that this is a business, that this is, like, the snake eating its own tail. It's not, none of it is real. It is purely in service of the business. Everything, even the kids, like, the full performance of it all. And she says that the kids don't see it right now, but they will when they're older, and they'll hate you for it. And then this develops when Shannon goes on primetime TV to basically expose Natalie and, like, whistleblow on her whole business. And she's adjusted her appearance. You know, Natalie describes her as being a very stereotypical young urban liberal. Like, she comes to the ranch and she has pink hair and a nose ring and whatever. By the time she goes on TV, she's got highlights in her hair, she's taken out the nose ring, and she's wearing a prairie dress. Very similar to the style that Natalie also has described herself wearing at points in the book. So it's almost like she's cosplaying Natalie. And it feels weird, right? But then you look at it and you're like, but isn't this just good communication? Like, making sure that what she says will land with the audience. Would the audience of primetime national news in America listen to her and take her seriously if she had pink hair and a nose ring? Probably not. Would they take her seriously if she was dressed in effectively an imitation of Natalie? Yeah. Which is why Natalie is so famous, right? Because that is what resonates. And you could argue that it's a performance in and of itself to communicate well, but then, like, ultimately, nothing Shannon says is false. she only tells the truth. So she's performing, but she's performing in service of making sure that the truth is heard and that her expose gets out there and that she is taken seriously. And I think it's really interesting. Like, reading this book has made me very conscious of performance. And I think about this, line between performance versus authenticity a lot as someone who records this podcast. Like, before I record the podcast, I put on makeup, and this is something I've discussed before as, part of the way I perform for this podcast, and it's something I'm aware of. After reading this book, I feel very aware of all the things I've done to perform, like putting on makeup, setting up the camera in such a way that to make sure the background is how I want it, and the lighting is good, and all this kind of stuff, and all the edifice that goes into this. Is edifice the right word? I think I meant artifice, but like all the things I take into consideration in my performance. And as I was thinking about it, like reflecting on it, when I was like, okay, I'm going to prepare for this podcast episode, and I need to do this, this, and this. And now having this heightened sense of awareness from this book, I started to feel guilty, like, oh shit, am I, pulling a Natalie? Am I doing that as well? But I think to some extent you need to on social media. Like, this is the internet, after all. The internet is a very big place. Some level of performance is important. I don't think that the way I show up with my friends and family should be the way I show up online. I don't think it's safe or healthy for unknown numbers of people to have access to me in that particular way. I never want to be so different that if my friends and family were to watch my content, they wouldn't recognize me. But it's still not the same way I am with them. And, there are certain things I don't talk about and I wouldn't talk about online. So in that way, like, there's a curation element to it, right? And I think in this case, curation is a more accurate word than performance, but ultimately, I'm still not being 100% transparent, but I am being authentic. Whenever I talk about anything, like I'm talking about this book, I'm giving my opinions on the book. These opinions are my opinions, and I'm being genuine about that. When I talk about things, I talk about them authentically in a way that feels right to me. I talk about, aspects of the thing that feel right for me to talk about. What I say is how I genuinely feel. And so I think that's where I draw the line. Again, as someone who records a podcast and does this kind of thing, I will not show up and put my whole life on the internet. That's not something I'm going to do. But what I will do is make sure that however I do show up is genuine. That's where I choose to draw the line, but I know everyone has different opinions on it, and especially generationally, people tend to have very different opinions on it. To bring it back to Natalie and her mother, because the relationship between them says a lot. Like, by the end of the book, when her mother has started moving forward with her life and living her life differently to the way that Natalie always knew, like, her mother starts going to a new church, she starts having more accepting beliefs, she starts going to therapy, and Natalie can't process it because it falls outside of the boundaries of the performance. And the thing is, I can understand why Natalie has a breakdown when she hears her mother talking about this, because, like, this is the person who perpetuated these ideas for you and, like, told you, get up and put on a show and you have to perform after you've just given birth, and, like, denied you access to the help. And now she is taking that same help. She denied Natalie access to psychological help, but here she is taking, like, doing therapy. Like, yeah, I can see why Natalie breaks down, because it is hard to hear that this person who sold you the world is now rejecting it and doing something different. But that's when Natalie's own nature comes in how cruel she is to her mother and how she responds to what her mom is telling her is, like, her newfound happiness. And Natalie doesn't give a shit and is just angry at her and vicious and mean because she's not performing anymore. Especially when her mother admits that she never was really upholding the beliefs she taught Natalie completely, because her husband didn't cheat, she cheated, and then she kicked him out, and then she enjoyed living as a single woman, so she lied to her children so she could continue doing that. Like, those were not the beliefs she taught Natalie, and yet this is what she does. And it's interesting to realise how much her mother influenced her, how much her mother pushed her to continue doing this at all the times when Natalie expressed doubt or, like, was still young enough to be impressionable, and then she gets to the point where it's too internalized. And her mother's like, I don't like it. But she's the one who put it there, and she puts it there even though she didn't fully live by it anyway. Like, the whole thing is bullshit, basically. And so when she is mean to her mother yells at her and is like, you think kindness is some silly, frivolous thing when it is in fact the whole damn point. And this is the thing that, like, Natalie doesn't get, because, as I've said before, she's a mean person. She has always been a mean person, because inside the world of performance she lives in, being a kind person is inefficient. Kindness is a button you press to get a response you want. It's not a thing in and of itself. Like, it's not the whole damn thing, as her mother puts it. And it's almost like you can't afford to be kind until you've gotten the things you want, until you've used it to push the buttons you want. Then only when that day comes can you accept kindness for kindness' sake. Obviously, this way of thinking doesn't work, because it's like, when will that day come? When will you feel like, okay, I am ready to be a kind person? But it's just another way that Natalie is very similar to Scarlett O'Hara, because she has the exact same kind of thinking, like I mentioned earlier. She knows exactly which buttons to press to get what she wants, especially when it comes to men. And that is exactly how she leverages and weaponizes kindness. And she can't understand genuine kindness and niceness in other people, like her mother, like in Melanie. And Scarlett does say as much. Like, I think she doesn't use the word inefficient, but she basically says, like, what is the point in Melanie's kindness? Like, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have ROI. And she sees it as something she aspires to. Like, she aspires to be a great woman like her mother, but she will be that great woman when things are settled. When she is in a position to be calm and be a great woman, then she'll be a great woman. Until then, she will be the mean person she needs to be and weaponize kindness, because she needs to get to that place first. And then she's not ready. And it's not something she understands until Melanie's on her deathbed. And she's like, gotcha, okay, this is what they meant when they said that kindness was the whole damn point. Except for Natalie, that realization never comes. Another thing that stood out to me was the fact that Natalie's oldest daughter is called Clementine. Natalie refers to Clementine as like, oh, the one that made me mother. But it's like, actually, Natalie didn't want Clementine when she was giving birth to her. She had postpartum depression after she had Clementine. She specifically says that she didn't get postpartum depression after her other kids because she had them back to back in such quick succession. But when it comes to Clementine, she did struggle. And I found it really interesting that her oldest daughter is named Clementine as the one who sees through all of her BS, because it reminded me of the nursery rhyme, and the nursery rhyme Clementine. The chorus is, "You are lost and gone forever, dreadful sorry, Clementine." And like, that's exactly how Natalie sees her, because they've never gotten along. Even when Clementine was born, they never had a bond. And Natalie can fake it with her other children, but she's never been able to fake it with Clementine. So like, Clementine as her lost daughter, yeah, it makes sense. However, I think that actually Natalie is the Clementine from the nursery rhyme, because first she was lost to motherhood. She didn't want to be a mother. She didn't want motherhood. She specifically says that, like, I am no longer Natalie, I am Mama now. And that is my new name, title, everything. Like, she effectively says that, like, Natalie is dead. I am now Mama. That is who I am. So she's lost and gone forever in that way. And more broadly speaking, she is lost and gone as a result of her mental illness, born of her performance as a good Christian woman for the Christian patriarchy. And I think it's because they never had a bond, because Natalie never bonded with her as a baby. From day dot, there wasn't that genuine warmth between them. And Clementine was aware of that. So when when Natalie was performing motherhood, performing affection, all that, Clementine knew exactly what that was. She wasn't confused by it. She knew it was a performance because there was no warm baseline for her to confuse it with. And she frees her family of this cycle in the most, like, dramatic and emphatic way that she possibly can, because she does it using legal means. She comes with a warrant for the youngest children to take the youngest children into her custody, and Natalie is arrested and sentenced to 30 years for aggravated child abuse. And so it's a very clear, definite, like I said, emphatic end to the cycle in the family, and Clementine is the one who breaks it. You are lost and gone forever. Dreadful sorry, Clementine. Even as I think about those lyrics, like, the dreadful sorry, you know, when a kid dies, who says dreadful sorry? Like, oh, it's like saying whoopsie, oh, dreadful sorry, I spilled the milk. Like, you wouldn't say that when a kid dies. And yet those are the lyrics of the song. Like, it's not, Clementine's death in the song is not taken seriously. The same way Natalie doesn't take Clementine seriously, and she's just like, okay, truly, deep down, she couldn't give a toss what happens to Clementine. I don't know if this much thought went into naming Clementine, but bloody hell, there's a lot of symbolism there. Okay, I think that wraps up everything I had to say about Yesteryear. What a book. Obviously, if you've watched this far, you've read it, because, like I said, it was full of spoilers. I want to know what you thought. What stood out to you in the book? What themes did you notice? I would love to hear in the comments. Please leave them below. I'm not surprised that someone snapped up the film rights to this book. I guess I'm surprised that it happened so quickly, because it feels like that doesn't typically happen, but it will be very interesting to see how it gets produced. To be honest, I think it would be much better as a TV show than it would be as a movie, but we'll see what happens. But I'm going to wrap up this episode now. Thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next episode.